Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to yet another episode of the Grounded and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, we have a very special one for you. We have Duke with us today. Mr. Duke, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Can you please introduce yourself briefly to the audience?
So I am Duke. The government knows me as Tumelo. So formally I'm Tumelo Rasebopye, but yeah, everyone calls me Duke.
Welcome to the show. So you are part of the transformation office in one of our big universities in the country. Before we get going, would you quickly define transformation for us, if you could?
So transformation is actually quite multifaceted. It is a layered process as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times people think around issues of race, around issues of sex, and I guess with the kind of or the level of gender-based violence that we are now coming to take note of within the country, people think around gender as well within the context of transformation. But what we generally think around is ideas around inclusion in all its forms, not just limited to the prominent ones. And we're thinking about how that inclusion really is co-created in a way in which really it's not just about only the marginalized groups finding space to exist, but how once in that space they will be affirmed, and how in that affirmation we don't find ourselves recreating marginalization as well. So that's really ideas around transformation are around facilitating greater inclusion of everyone within a particular community space, where there is just human interaction.
Oh, wow, that's actually quite a broad explanation, and actually puts it into perspective. Because I think, also for me, when I think of transformation, the one you hear about in the news is, in the national teams saying they want to transform the national teams by having more players of color, etc., in different degrees, different faculties. But that's, I could say, is an aspect of the inclusion part of the definition that you were mentioning.
It's probably step one. It's a form of. So we would speak about ideas around procedural and substantive justice. So it's a quota would very easily take the procedural part of transformation. So you've done the process that allows a channel for people to come in. We wouldn't, or at the very least, I wouldn't necessarily fully consider that to be inclusion.
Okay.
Because we haven't necessarily ensured that the space that someone has entry into is conducive for their existence, for them to flourish and thrive within that particular space. So that's where the substantive part of it would come in, where it is a tangible inclusion. It's a tangible form of equality. You can actually realize and self-actualize yourself within that particular space that you're allowed entry into.
Okay, I see. And then how would you say that throughout the years, how has transformation progressed? Because you mentioned that now the idea that most people have is just a method. Now we're in a society where more people are coming out in terms of their identity, their sexualities. All of that is progressing. How would you say from a personal aspect?
Well, I would say we've made some good progress. It's a mixed bag, and it will always be a mixed bag. But we've seen significant progress from major protests that have taken place, and I think what we also come in to see is that growth and that change and transformation moves a whole lot quicker when driven by students than when it is driven by staff members. So we do see that, and that has really brought about a lot of change. I mean, the anti-discrimination policy in the university that was initiated by students who had issues with the anti-sexual harassment policy that spoke to staff members more than themselves. And that is also a product of student activism, even ideas and conversations around language. And I mean, you can have debates around whether the language policy at this point in time is adequate or not, but then it has started the conversation, and students were at the forefront of that. When we're thinking around gender inclusion, that was also facilitated through the anti-discrimination policy. So that affirmation of gender diverse individuals, gender non-conforming individuals within the university space to be able to register under their preferred or chosen identity, even though within the legal system externally they would not qualify to have that level of affirmation. That is possible, and and something that is pushed and advanced within the university space at this point in time. And there's still a whole lot more that does happen. There's still a lot more that is being looked at in terms of inclusion, for disability, for spirituality and religion. Those are the kinds of ideas where we're thinking also around residence life. How would a gender diverse and a gender non-conforming residence culture look like? And those conversations are taking place at this point in time.
Oh, okay. That's quite interesting that you mentioned that all these movements are student-led. So basically it's like saying the youth is kind of taking action and being accountable and stepping up in the forefront to say this is the issues we have and these are the steps we're willing to take to have these issues mitigated and handled. So that's quite interesting. And as you're being part of the transformation office, what would you say is like its role and the importance of having such a structure in a university setting?
So the unfortunate part is that oftentimes we can't leave people to their vices if we are looking to transform. We really do need to be intentional, even at a personal level. If you would looking to develop some levels of behavioral change, you would need to be intentional yourself in cultivating those traits, those habits that you would like to have full expression of in your own personal space and in your own personal relationships in your life holistically. And the institution would need to navigate in the very same way. And over and above ideas of ensuring that we have policies in place like the anti-discrimination policy and systems in place that facilitate expression for that policy, like being able to register under your chosen gender identity. The Transformation Office is necessary in order to ensure that we are doing that work and that we are intentional about doing that work, ensuring that over and above the institution having institutional culture surveys to see where we are in terms of our institutional culture in comparison to where we were 10 years ago when we did the last survey. Those kind of things are important, but in terms of the university doing its work, we can't leave departments, sectors and institutes to facilitate that for themselves. As much as we do encourage a level of initiative at that level, the Transformation Office comes in to ensure that there is a socialization of the anti-discrimination policy, that programs are run, that where maybe there is some kind of guidance needed in terms of a gap that the policy may not so comprehensively cover, then we come in and support the creation of protocols that then support the policy and ensuring that the transformation is driven within the university space. So it's in terms of the policy seeking to create an inclusive, affirming and transformed into institutional space, the Transformation Office is actively engaged in that work on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, that's actually a lot that the Transformation Office does. So it's like you guys oversee everything and ensure that the right channels are being followed, and where help is needed, they can get assistance. Yeah,
including the investigation of cases. So if someone reports a case of discrimination, a case of gender-based violence, sexual harassment, then those would not even need to go through what would be the other escalation policies. You then can just come directly to the transformation and report that, and the Transformation Office would then report directly to the Vice Chancellor. So it ensures that it is transferring justice to the ground where the masses in terms of the university's constituencies are, being staff and students and anyone else who enters the space, but also ensuring that the executive level is kept abreast of what kind of cases are we seeing, what are the trends within the university space, and whether or not we are being adequately responding to it as part of the accountability that we receive as an office at an executive level.
Oh, okay, I see. And what would you say have been the challenges with in the Transformation Office and with transformation?
Behavioral change is tough. Also, I think some things really are developing at a much quicker pace than what policy can. But I think thus far we've been able to stay abreast of the kind of interventions that we need to deliver. But I mean, the challenges pretty much would be that behavioral change takes time. And also the institution is fairly big, so the ripples are taking time to reach everyone.
I see.
But yeah, we continue with the work as far as we possibly can, and having different stakeholders and different interventions through different mediums as well allows us to reach as far as we possibly can.
Oh, I see. And then now to kind of diverse a bit, when you think about it, what social stigma do you think that society needs to get over from your personal point of view?
I don't think there's necessarily one.
Yeah.
But I think our activism in some instances has turned us cold. So we no longer have elements of compassion. So I think we've seen that cultivate ideas around cancel cultures, for example. It has seen us cultivate habits of determining who is worthy of being gentle with and who is worthy of being harsh and quite I would say harmful towards as well.
Yeah.
So I think we need to move away from binaries where we categorize someone as either or, as that or the other.
Yeah.
Because then I think that leads to those kinds of stereotypes and stigmatizations that in some instances we may think speak truth to power, but only come to support the creation and co-creation of harm, rather than in actual fact looking at cultivating, more inclusive, safer spaces within the institution.
I like that, actually. I like that. That is true, because we do see a lot of cancel culture, and as you're saying, the categorizing of certain groups and saying, no, you don't deserve compassion because of whatever reason, and instead of just being a compassionate person or being a welcoming and inclusive society as a whole.
And that doesn't mean that we should give people get out of jail free cards.
Yeah, that is true.
That definitely is not the case. I think we are able to hold people accountable without necessarily reproducing harm. We are able to hold people accountable without needing to depend on violent systems in order to do that. So if indeed we are committed and hell-bent on the eradication of violent and harmful principles and practices within our communities, organizations, and institutions, then we need to come to an understanding that we can't pursue justice through the very same means. Otherwise, we are merely going to reproduce different manifestations of violence rather than actually coming to a point of eradicating the violence and harm itself.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I think like holding people accountable is a way of showing love to the person at the same time, because you're helping them man up or stand up for what they did, and then they learn from their mistakes and stuff like that. Without accountability, no one actually learns from their mistakes. No one can grow as an individual and actually do better and become a better individual as well.
For sure.
Yeah. And then a very important question that I like asking on the show is, what does grounded and fearless mean to you?
I think grounded means that you really do need to have a value base that you stand by.
Yeah.
You really do need to have principles that you actually hold dear and curate your life and life experiences around. Without that, you really are nothing better or any different to a leaf in the wind. So wherever the wind blows, you swerve and you maneuver yourself in order to ride the wave and have a gentle landing wherever you can be. But if we are principled, I think we are able to stand our ground and weather the storms, because storms will come. But through our principles, we are able to also develop a sense of resilience as well. I think that's what grounded would be. And being fearless, I think more often than not, we are not standing by those principles as well. Being fearless, I think, is being in a position where even if you are still cultivating those good principles that you aspire towards, showing up in the best possible way that you can in alignment with those principles as well. So we need to be fearless in that regard and cultivate those good principles and think around what we aspire to experience as a safe, joyful, fulfilling life, and what elements are necessary in order to create that and give that to others, even though we may not necessarily have it, and give that and extend that to others in the best possible way that we can, while also cultivating those very same things for ourselves.
Oh, that's very powerful. I actually liked it a lot. Being grounded is being standing on principle and value, and the fearless comes in where even though you're still aspiring to those values and principles, you can still show up while aspiring to that without being fearful of knowing that I'm not there yet, but I have the courage to show up.
Yeah.
That's quite good. So now I'm going to ask you 3 would you rather questions. It's just basically to try and see what kind of person you are before we call it a day.
Okay.
So the first one is, would you rather win the lottery or live twice as long?
I'd rather live the lottery. I probably can afford to live twice as long after.
Fair enough. I'll also choose that one. I don't think there's so much you can do with this world living twice as long.
Money is the answer to all things. So if the question is how can I live long, I'm sure money can figure it out.
Yeah, fair enough. And there are rich people who are actually trying to reverse their aging processes. So I'm sure you probably fall in line and figure it out with them.
I'll sign up for that debit order. It's cool.
And then the second question is, be forced to live the same day over and over again for a full year, or take 3 years off the end of your life.
I mean, look, honestly speaking, I already don't know when the last day of my life will be. So if you remove 3 days, there's really no difference in terms of my trajectory.
Yeah.
So I'd pick that so that I have
true.
a more diversified experience until the time of my death.
Oh, that's actually quite interesting. And the last one, actually, very interesting. Would you rather be gassy on the first date or on your wedding night?
Look, we're probably all gassy on our wedding nights anyway. But by then, this person has already probably smelt it.
Yeah.
Has already dealt with the worst of the worst. So I'll take wedding day, wedding night,
Really?
anytime.
I think,
It would be nothing new. It would be nothing new, you know?
Yeah.
It would be just like, hey, another one.
Another one.
Exactly.
Been with this for the past, I don't know how long.
Exactly.
I would have thought of taking it on the first date because, if she stays or he or she stays, that's the one.
Look, I believe in not testing people.
Too early, yeah.
I believe in not testing people. So yeah, look, the farts will come eventually. But I'm sure a fart would never be a deal breaker if the person is right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I feel you. Well, Duke, we've come to the end of the episode. Before you leave, do you have any last words for the viewers and the listeners?
No, nothing much. Just thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about the kind of work that I do. I really enjoyed the episode, and I really hope people will do better in cultivating that compassion. Yeah. And also, spend time identifying what kind of values and principles do they hope to curate their life around. And be intentional in extending those towards other people as well.
Thank you so much for coming to the show. I also enjoyed the conversation and engaging with you with this topic and the theme of the show. Is something that we need to be comfortable having conversations around, especially with the history of our country being such a diverse country. Inclusion is very important, and the compassion needs to come in as well.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Sure.
Allah.